Don't touch me unless you mean it. He saved an Apache stranger and paid for it with love. The sun was just beginning to rise over the dusty horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. In the quiet town near the edge of the reservation, the streets were still empty, save for a few early risers heading to work or tending to chores. The air smelled faintly of earth, dry grass, and the faint smoke of morning fires. The town had a rhythm of its own, slow but steady, and everyone knew each other by sight if not by name. Life here moved at a pace dictated by the land, the animals, and the unforgiving sun. On the outskirts of the town, a rancher was already up, his boots crunching against the gravel as he walked toward the barn. His hands were rough, calloused from years of work with horses and cattle, and his face carried lines from the sun and wind. People often said he looked tough, like someone you wouldn't want to cross, but those who knew him understood there was more beneath the surface. He had a quiet strength, a calm way of handling problems, and a deep respect for life in all its forms. Today, like every day, he moved with purpose, checking the horses, making sure the fences were secure, and preparing for the long hours ahead. Farther into the town, near a small dusty road, a young Apache woman appeared. She moved cautiously, her eyes alert, constantly scanning her surroundings. She had arrived in the town only recently, carrying a small bag and the weight of her own past with her. Her journey had been long and tiring, filled with moments that tested her patience, strength, and courage. She had learned early on to rely on herself and to trust very few people. Her family was far away, and though she longed for connection, her experiences had taught her that kindness was rare, and danger often came from unexpected places. As she walked, she noticed the way people in the town looked at her. Some were curious, some indifferent, and some carried an air of judgment. She had felt these looks before, whispers and sideways glances that reminded her she was different. But she kept her head high, walked with determination, and refused to let their opinions shake her. She had learned that survival required confidence, even if it was only a mask she wore over her inner worries. The town had a small market, just a few stalls with fresh produce, handmade goods, and local crafts. As she approached, she felt a sudden pang of anxiety. It wasn't that she feared the people, but rather she was unprepared for the unexpected. Life had taught her to expect challenges at every turn, and this morning felt like one of those times. She moved carefully, her hands clutching the strap of her bag, her senses alert. Just as she reached the corner near the market, something happened that changed the course of her day, and perhaps her life. A loose horse, startled by a passing vehicle, bolted through the street, its hooves pounding against the wooden planks and gravel. The horse's sudden movement sent a man nearby scrambling, and it was clear that anyone in its path could be seriously hurt. The woman froze for a moment, her heart racing. She knew instinctively that she couldn't stay still, but she also knew that rushing could put her in danger. At that moment, the rancher appeared. He had heard the commotion from his property and had come running, his long strides closing the distance quickly. Without hesitation, he stepped into the street, positioning himself between the horse and the woman. His voice was calm but firm, carrying authority born from years of handling animals. He called out to the horse, guiding it slowly, carefully, until it finally calmed and slowed. The woman watched, amazed and slightly shaken. She had never seen anyone handle a dangerous situation with such confidence and care. The rancher's presence was commanding, yet there was a gentleness in the way he spoke to the horse, a respect that made her heart beat differently. When the immediate danger passed, he turned to her, offering a hand to make sure she was safe. She hesitated, recalling all the times she had been hurt or betrayed, all the reasons not to trust so quickly. "Don't touch me unless you mean it," she said softly, almost to herself, but loud enough for him to hear. Her voice carried a mixture of fear, caution, and an unexpected hint of challenge. The rancher paused, listening carefully. He didn't pull back, nor did he dismiss her words. Instead, he nodded slowly, understanding the weight behind them. There was no rush, no pressure, just patience, quiet and steady, as if he knew that trust was something earned, not demanded. He helped her move to a safer spot, staying nearby but giving her space. He asked simple questions about whether she was hurt, if she needed water, or if there was someone he could call. His tone was gentle, patient, and sincere. He didn't pry into her life or her reasons for being there, but he made it clear that she wasn't alone. As they stood there, a few townspeople gathered to watch, whispering among themselves. Some were impressed, some skeptical, but none could deny the quiet strength of the man who had stepped in without hesitation. The woman noticed their stares, but didn't let them distract her. She kept her focus on the rancher, studying his face, trying to understand why he had acted so selflessly. Time seemed to slow. The sounds of the town faded into the background, the creak of old signs, the distant crow of a rooster, the rustle of the dry grass in the wind. All that mattered was the presence of this man who had saved her without asking for anything in return. There was a strange comfort in that, a feeling she hadn't experienced in years, but along with comfort came fear. She had learned that relying on others often led to disappointment. She wasn't ready to give her trust lightly, not yet. The rancher, sensing her hesitation, didn't push. Instead, he shared a small story about his morning, checking on a horse that had been sick, repairing a fence, making sure everything on the ranch was in order. His words were simple, yet there was warmth in his voice, an unspoken message that he was not dangerous, that he could be trusted. The woman found herself relaxing just a little as she listened. She noticed the kindness in his eyes, the patience in his gestures, and the way he treated her with respect. It was different from anything she had encountered before. There were no demands, no judgment, only an offer of safety and understanding. By the time the sun had fully risen, painting the town in bright light, the woman had taken a few cautious steps closer to the rancher. She still held onto her caution, repeating her mantra silently, "Don't touch me, unless you mean it." But for the first time, she felt the possibility that someone could mean it, that someone could be there for her without hidden motives. The rancher, for his part, knew this was just the beginning. He understood that trust could not be rushed, that the woman's past would make her wary, and that the road ahead would require patience. But he was ready. Ready to act with care, ready to protect, ready to be there when she needed help. As the morning turned into afternoon, the woman moved through the town with him nearby, sometimes just close enough to offer reassurance, sometimes giving her space to breathe and think. Each interaction, no matter how small, built a foundation. Small acts, offering a glass of water, helping carry a bag, guiding her away from danger, became gestures of trust, silent promises that he was someone she could rely on. She began to notice other things about him too, the way he treated animals, the respect he showed for the land, the quiet confidence in the way he walked and spoke. Each observation added a layer of understanding, a reason to believe that maybe, just maybe, people could be kind without expecting something in return. By the time the sun began to dip toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the town, there was a subtle shift in the air. The woman's posture softened just slightly. She wasn't ready to fully trust, but she was beginning to consider the possibility. The rancher, aware of the delicate balance, didn't push. He simply remained a steady presence, a protector, and a quiet friend. As evening approached, they reached the edge of the town, where the dusty road met the open land. The woman paused, looking back toward the town and then at the rancher. She didn't speak, but her eyes conveyed a mixture of gratitude, caution, and curiosity. The rancher nodded, understanding that words weren't always necessary, that actions often spoke louder than any conversation. That night, as the woman settled into a small inn for her first night in town, she reflected on the day. She replayed the events in her mind. The danger, the rescue, the kindness of a stranger who had risked himself without expecting anything in return. She realized that this man had broken through a barrier she had built years ago, showing her that it was possible to feel safe, even if only for a moment. And somewhere deep inside, she whispered again, almost like a promise to herself, "Don't touch me unless you mean it." But this time the words felt different. There was hope woven into them, a faint glimmer that perhaps someone could mean it, that someone could be trusted with her heart. The rancher, meanwhile, returned to his ranch, thinking about the woman and the brief encounter that had changed both of their days. He knew their paths had crossed for a reason and that their story was just beginning. He didn't know what challenges lay ahead, but he was ready to face them, ready to show patience, courage, and unwavering care. The town, quiet once more under the setting sun, held the promise of something new, a connection formed through courage, respect, and the smallest acts of love. The first part of their story had ended, but the journey was only beginning. And in the quiet moments before sleep, both the rancher and the woman felt it, the subtle, unspoken understanding that sometimes the right person could appear in the most unexpected ways, changing everything without a word. The next morning, the sun rose slowly over the town, spilling warm light across the dusty streets and wooden buildings. Birds chirped in the distance, and a gentle breeze rustled through the dry grass. The Apache woman woke early, as she always did, carrying with her the weight of yesterday's events. Her thoughts were a mix of gratitude, caution, and curiosity. She had seen something in the rancher that she had rarely seen in people, genuine care without expectation. But trust was fragile, and she wasn't ready to give it lightly. After washing her face and sipping some water, she left the small inn and walked toward the edge of town. She needed space, time to think, and the quiet of the open land beyond the buildings. She walked with a careful rhythm, her eyes scanning the horizon, the wind tugging at her hair. Each step reminded her of the lessons she had learned in life: trust few, rely on yourself, and never let your guard down. The rancher, meanwhile, was already awake at his ranch, tending to the animals and preparing for the day's work. Horses needed feeding, fences needed fixing, and cattle needed checking. Yet his mind wandered back to the woman. There was something about her cautious strength, the way she carried herself, that had left an impression on him. He respected her boundaries and knew that patience was the key if he was to earn her trust. By mid-morning, the woman found herself near the market once more. Life in the town was starting to bustle, shopkeepers arranging goods, children running past, and townspeople going about their routines. She paused for a moment, studying the activity around her. The market felt alive, but it also reminded her of the fragility of trust. One wrong step, one careless action, and things could turn dangerous quickly. As she considered moving through the market, she saw the rancher approaching. He moved calmly, deliberately, giving her space but staying close enough to offer reassurance. He carried nothing threatening, only a small bucket of water for his animals, but his presence was comforting. The woman felt a mix of relief and wariness. She had survived on her own for so long that depending on someone else felt almost unnatural. Yet his demeanor was gentle, respectful, and steady, a stark contrast to the chaos of her past experiences. "Good morning," he said, his voice calm and warm. "I thought I'd bring some water for the horses before it gets too hot." She nodded briefly, her eyes cautious. "Thank you," she replied, her tone polite but guarded. She didn't move closer, didn't offer her hand, just allowed him to be there without rejecting him outright. That small acknowledgement was progress, an opening in her defenses, tiny but significant. The rancher smiled, sensing the subtle shift. He knew trust couldn't be rushed, that every small interaction mattered. He didn't press her to talk or reveal anything about herself. Instead, he focused on simple gestures of help, carrying his water bucket, pointing out a safer path through the market, and keeping an eye on the bustling street to ensure nothing dangerous happened near her. As the morning progressed, the woman observed him closely. She noticed how he treated others with respect, how he spoke kindly to the shopkeepers, and how he never interrupted or forced his way into conversations. There was a consistency in his behavior, a quiet reliability that made her wonder if people could truly be trusted. She began to realize that actions spoke louder than words. His patience and respect were not empty gestures. They were deliberate, consistent, and sincere. Later, a small incident occurred that tested both of them. A young boy, playing too close to the market stalls, accidentally knocked over a crate of vegetables. The produce spilled onto the dusty ground, and the child froze, scared of the reaction he would face. Some nearby townspeople began murmuring, ready to scold the boy harshly. The rancher stepped forward, kneeling beside the child. "It's okay," he said gently. "Accidents happen, let's pick this up together." He guided the boy, showing him how to stack the crates carefully. The woman watched silently, realizing that the rancher's kindness extended beyond her. It was a part of who he was. She had seen people act caring for a moment or for personal gain, but this was different. This was genuine, consistent compassion. After the crates were restored, the boy ran off, smiling and grateful. The rancher stood up and nodded at the woman, a silent acknowledgement that he was still there, patient and reliable. She allowed herself a small, cautious smile in return. It wasn't much, but it was progress, a tiny step toward trust, toward connection. The day continued with small moments that slowly built the bridge between them. He helped her carry a few small items she had purchased, guided her around uneven patches of road, and occasionally shared a quiet word of encouragement. She didn't speak much about herself, but she listened when he spoke, intrigued by his simple stories of life on the ranch. The early mornings, the care for animals, and the satisfaction of a hard day's work done well. By afternoon, the town began to show its challenges. Some people whispered about the woman's presence, questioning why a stranger had come and why the rancher was helping her. Others tried to interfere, offering unsolicited advice or creating obstacles to see how she would react. The woman felt the tension building, a reminder of why she had always relied on herself. Yet, through it all, the rancher remained a steady presence. When someone tried to push her aside or question her, he calmly intervened, speaking with authority but without aggression. He didn't argue or escalate the situation. He simply ensured she was safe and supported. The woman began to notice that she could rely on him in ways she hadn't allowed herself to rely on anyone before. As the afternoon sun grew hotter, the woman felt fatigue and tension creeping in. Her past experiences had taught her that vulnerability could be dangerous, yet here she was, slowly allowing herself to feel safe in someone else's presence. The rancher noticed her weariness and suggested a place to rest, a quiet spot under the shade of an old oak tree at the edge of town. She accepted, and they walked together, not speaking much, just sharing the space in mutual respect. Under the tree, the woman finally let herself relax, leaning against the trunk with her arms crossed. She still kept her distance, but there was a subtle change in her posture, a hint of trust beginning to form. The rancher sat nearby, careful to give her space, yet close enough to offer protection if needed. He didn't pressure her to speak or act differently. He simply existed as a steady, reliable presence. Hours passed like this, filled with quiet observation and small, meaningful gestures. The woman began to see patterns in his behavior, noticing that his actions were consistent with his words, that his kindness wasn't selective or performative. She started to feel something she hadn't felt in a long time: hope. Hope that not everyone had a hidden agenda, that some people were capable of genuine care, patience, and respect. Later, a minor challenge arose when a small fire broke out near one of the town's wooden stalls. People panicked, unsure of how to respond quickly. The rancher acted immediately, using his knowledge of fire safety and quick thinking to help control the flames until the local fire brigade arrived. The woman watched, impressed not only by his bravery but also by his calmness under pressure. He didn't seek recognition, he simply acted because it was the right thing to do. After the fire was controlled, townspeople praised him, but he brushed it off, immediately checking on the woman to make sure she was unharmed. She realized once again that his actions were guided by care, not ego. She felt a mixture of admiration, relief, and growing curiosity. Who was this man, and why did he act with such integrity and patience? As the sun began to set, painting the sky with shades of orange and purple, the woman reflected on the day. The small gestures, the calm presence, and the genuine care had all begun to break down the walls she had built around herself. She wasn't ready to fully trust him, but she was beginning to see the possibility of connection, of safety, and of understanding. The rancher walked her back toward the inn, giving her space but remaining nearby. She noticed his steady gaze, the careful way he respected her boundaries, and the patience he showed even when the day had been long and challenging. It was a new kind of presence for her, something she had rarely experienced in her life. Before parting ways for the evening, he spoke softly, "You don't have to trust me right away. Just know that I'll be here if you need help." Her response was quiet, almost a whisper, yet it carried meaning. "I know, I'm just not sure yet." Her words were honest, and for the first time in years, she didn't feel the need to hide them. As she entered her room at the inn, she sat by the window, watching the last light fade from the sky. Her heart felt heavy with emotion, a mix of relief, curiosity, and cautious hope. She had survived the day with help, guidance, and protection, and she had begun to see that it was possible for someone to care without expectation. In the quiet of her room, she repeated her mantra silently, a reminder and a promise to herself. "Don't touch me unless you mean it." But this time, the words carried a hint of hope, of possibility, and a recognition that perhaps someone could mean it, truly and sincerely. Meanwhile, the rancher returned to his ranch, tending to the animals and preparing for the next day. Yet, he thought often of the woman and the moments they had shared. He knew that trust was fragile, that her walls had been built over years of experience and caution, and that he would need patience. But he was ready to continue showing care, to act with integrity, and to prove slowly but surely that he could be trusted. That night, both the woman and the rancher felt the subtle shift of beginnings, the first signs of trust, the faint glimmer of connection, and the understanding that sometimes human kindness and patience could break through even the most guarded hearts. The days following their first meeting passed slowly, each filled with small moments that built an invisible bridge between the rancher and the Apache woman. The sun rose and fell with quiet predictability, yet for both of them, every day was different. Every glance, every gesture carried meaning. She was still cautious, still guarded, but she could no longer deny the subtle pull toward someone who had shown her care without demanding anything in return. It was mid-morning when the first real test arrived. A sudden storm rolled in from the west, dark clouds swallowing the sky and gusting winds tearing across the town. The townspeople hurried to secure their homes and shops, rushing to tie down loose signs and bring animals into shelter. The Apache woman had been outside, collecting some items she needed from the market, and the sudden wind and rain threatened to throw everything into chaos. She struggled with her bag, heavy and cumbersome, as the wind tried to push her off balance. From across the street, the rancher spotted her immediately. He didn't hesitate. Running through the storm, his boots splashing in puddles and mud, he reached her side just as a strong gust knocked her bag to the ground. Without waiting for thanks or explanation, he bent down, picked up the scattered items, and steadied her with a firm but gentle hand on her shoulder. The woman instinctively flinched, whispering the words she had repeated so often in her mind. "Don't touch me unless you mean it." He met her eyes, the storm whipping around them, and nodded slightly. There was no rush, no pressure, just presence. "I mean it," he said softly, and it wasn't just words. The sincerity in his voice carried weight, a quiet promise that he would act with care without expectation. She felt the tension in her body ease slightly, though caution remained. They worked together to secure her belongings, moving toward the inn where she stayed. The storm intensified, rain pelting down in sheets and wind tugging at their clothes. The rancher shielded her with his body when possible, guiding her through the chaos, making sure she didn't slip or fall. Her trust in him grew not through words but through actions, through the patience, courage, and thoughtfulness he showed, even in the midst of danger. Once safely inside, they watched the storm rage outside. The room smelled of wet earth and damp wood, the kind of smell that reminded her of childhood rains on the reservation. She realized she had never felt this level of protection before. People had helped her in the past, but always with conditions or hidden motives. This was different. This was unconditional, simple, and real. For the next few days, the storm left behind more than just puddles. It damaged part of the town's infrastructure, fallen signs, broken fences, and loose animals roaming the streets. The rancher didn't hesitate to take action. He spent hours helping townspeople repair damage, round up stray animals, and ensure the market and homes were safe. The Apache woman watched him tirelessly help others, his hands rough and worn, his face showing exhaustion, but his determination unwavering. Her curiosity grew into admiration. She began to see the depth of his character, the way he didn't act for recognition or thanks, but because it was the right thing to do. She started speaking to him more, asking small questions about his life, his work, and his experiences. Each answer revealed layers of patience, resilience, and integrity. He spoke honestly, never exaggerating, never hiding the struggles he had faced, yet always maintaining a sense of calm strength. Then came the real turning point, one that would test both of them in a way they hadn't expected. One evening, while she was walking back from the small market with a few supplies, a group of men approached. They were loud, menacing, and clearly looking to intimidate her. Fear gripped her instantly. Her instincts screamed to run to protect herself, but the men blocked her path, laughing and making crude remarks. Before she could react, the rancher appeared. He had been nearby, keeping an eye on the town, and he didn't hesitate. His voice was firm and commanding, cutting through the tension. "Leave her alone," he said, his tone calm but unyielding. The men hesitated, surprised by the authority in his voice. He stepped forward, positioning himself between her and the group, his presence alone demanding respect. One of the men tried to push past him, but the rancher held his ground, steady and unafraid. "I said leave her alone," he repeated. There was no anger, only a controlled power that made it clear he would not be moved. The men, sensing the determination and strength in him, finally backed off, muttering under their breath as they disappeared into the night. The Apache woman was shaken but grateful. She realized with a clarity that took her breath away that he had risked himself for her safety, not because anyone asked him to, not because he would gain anything, but simply because he cared. For the first time, she felt a mix of fear, relief, and awe, and she could no longer deny the emotions stirring in her heart. That night, she reflected on everything he had done for her. The storm, the small gestures, the unwavering presence during danger. It all painted a picture of a man whose actions spoke louder than words. She thought about her past, about the times she had been betrayed or abandoned, and she realized that trust wasn't easy, but sometimes it was worth the risk. The rancher returned to his ranch, aware that his actions had consequences. He had shown bravery, patience, and care, and he knew the woman was beginning to see his sincerity. Yet he also understood that trust was delicate, that pushing too hard could break the fragile bond forming between them. He respected her pace, giving her space while remaining ready to support her at any moment. Over the following days, the connection between them deepened. The woman began to rely on him more, asking for guidance when she needed it and allowing herself to accept help. She noticed how he treated the town, the animals, and even strangers with a consistent kindness that made her heart feel both wary and warm. She was beginning to see that love wasn't always dramatic or overwhelming. It could be patient, steady, and quiet, growing through small acts of care and protection. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the town, they sat together on the porch of the inn. The air was cool, and the sounds of the town had softened into a gentle hum. She watched him carefully, noticing the lines in his face, the strength in his hands, and the calm in his eyes. He was tired from a day of work, yet he had made the effort to ensure her comfort and safety. "I've never met anyone like you," she said quietly, her voice carrying a mixture of awe and hesitation. You do things without expecting anything in return." He smiled softly, a small, genuine smile that reached his eyes. "I just do what I can," he replied. "I think it's the right thing to do." Her heart stirred at his words, but fear and caution still held her back. She had learned to protect herself, to keep her heart guarded. Yet now she realized that perhaps some people were different, people who could be trusted, people who could care without strings attached. The next day brought another challenge. A minor accident occurred at the edge of the town. A horse had gotten loose, frightening children nearby and causing a commotion. The rancher acted immediately, chasing after the animal with skill and determination. The Apache woman watched from a distance, heart pounding as she saw him maneuver through the chaos with precision and care. When he finally caught the horse and guided it back to safety, he immediately checked on the children, ensuring they were unharmed. The woman's admiration deepened. She realized that courage wasn't just about bravery in the face of danger. It was about consistency, patience, and putting others first. The rancher's actions were a reflection of his character, a mirror showing her what genuine care looked like. That evening, as they walked back together, she found herself speaking more freely, sharing small stories about her past, her travels, and her life experiences. He listened with patience, never interrupting or judging. The weight of years of isolation and caution began to lift slightly, replaced by a cautious sense of connection and understanding. She began to notice little things about him, how he remembered details from their conversations, how he anticipated needs without being asked, and how he treated everyone with respect. These small observations built trust, layer by layer, and she found herself thinking about him even when he wasn't around. One night, as they watched the stars from the inn's porch, she whispered the words that had guided her for years. "Don't touch me unless you mean it." But this time, the words felt different. There was a sense of understanding, of possibility, and a recognition that perhaps someone could truly mean it. The rancher didn't respond with words. Instead, he simply nodded, a silent acknowledgement of the promise he had already shown through his actions. She felt a warmth spread through her chest, a mix of relief, hope, and the beginnings of love. She realized that true connection wasn't about grand gestures, it was about patience, consistency, and respect. As the nights passed, their bond grew stronger. She still maintained her caution, but she began to see the possibility of a future where she could trust, where she could allow herself to feel safe and cared for. The rancher, in turn, continued to act with patience and unwavering support, understanding that her past had shaped her, and that love required time, respect, and gentle guidance. By the end of part 3, the foundation of their relationship had been firmly laid. The storm, the threats, and the small everyday challenges had tested their patience, courage, and trust. Yet through it all, they had discovered something rare, a connection built not on words, but on actions, integrity, and genuine care. The Apache woman was no longer entirely guarded. She had begun to believe that perhaps someone could care for her without expecting anything in return. The rancher had proven that true bravery and love were not always loud or dramatic. They were steady, patient, and consistent. And in that quiet understanding, both of them felt the first true stirrings of hope, connection, and the possibility of love that could last a lifetime. The morning sun spilled over the horizon, casting warm, golden light across the town. Birds chirped in the distance, and the cool breeze carried the scent of earth and dry grass. It was another ordinary morning, yet for the Apache woman and the rancher, it was far from ordinary. Days of cautious trust, small gestures of care, and quiet moments of connection had finally begun to form something deeper, a bond that neither could ignore. The woman woke early, as she always did, but this morning felt different. She had spent nights reflecting on the rancher's actions, on the patience he had shown, and on the genuine care he had offered. Her heart was no longer entirely guarded. Small cracks had formed in the walls she had built around herself. She felt curiosity, anticipation, and a cautious hope, a combination she hadn't felt in years. She walked to the edge of town, carrying a few items she needed, and noticed the rancher already waiting near the stable. He had risen early, as always, checking on the horses and preparing for the day. Yet, as she approached, he looked up, smiled gently, and nodded. That simple gesture carried meaning, acknowledgement, respect, and the quiet promise of his constant presence. "Good morning," he said softly. His voice was steady and calm, the same voice that had guided her, protected her, and encouraged her without judgment. "Good morning," she replied, her tone cautious but warm. For the first time, her words carried something more, trust. She was beginning to believe that he would not betray her, that he truly cared without expecting anything in return. They worked together throughout the morning. The rancher tended to the animals while she helped with small chores, each task an opportunity to deepen their connection. Words were not always necessary. Sometimes, a shared glance or a quiet smile conveyed everything that needed to be said. She noticed how he moved with confidence and care, how he treated the animals gently yet firmly, and how he respected her space while remaining close enough to support her. By afternoon, the town required their attention. A minor crisis arose when a storm had caused some fencing to break near the cattle pens. The rancher and the woman rushed to fix the damage, working side by side. She observed him carefully, how he thought ahead, anticipated problems, and guided the animals calmly. She realized that bravery was not just about confronting danger. It was about consistent, thoughtful action and taking responsibility for those who could not protect themselves. As they worked, a few townspeople came by to help. Some were curious, others skeptical, but the rancher's reputation for integrity and kindness preceded him. The woman noticed the respect people gave him, not out of fear, but because they knew he acted with honesty and fairness. Seeing this, she felt a growing sense of pride and admiration. She realized that the man who had rescued her, who had protected her, and who had offered quiet support was someone rare, a person she could rely on, someone she could begin to trust with her heart. By evening, the work was done. The rancher and the woman returned to the edge of town, where the fields stretched out under the fading sunlight. The air was calm, carrying the scent of dry grass and the first hints of evening dew. They paused for a moment, watching the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink, purple, and gold. It was a quiet, magical moment, and for the first time the woman felt completely at ease in his presence. She turned to him, her eyes reflecting the colors of the sky. I think I'm starting to understand," she said softly. "You really mean it, all of it, everything you've done, everything you've said, it's real." The rancher smiled gently, a warmth in his eyes that made her heart beat faster. "I've meant it from the beginning," he replied. "I wanted you to see it, to feel it, and to know that you could trust me without fear." Tears welled in her eyes, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming sense of relief and gratitude. She had spent years protecting herself, hiding her heart, and doubting the intentions of others. But now here was someone who had shown her patience, care, and unwavering support, a man who had proven that love could be steady, respectful, and real. She took a tentative step closer, still cautious, still aware of the vulnerability she felt. The rancher didn't rush her. He simply stood there waiting, giving her the freedom to make her own choice. There was no pressure, no demand, only quiet understanding. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. I want to trust you. I want to believe that what you mean is real." The rancher reached out gently, his hand brushing hers, careful not to overwhelm her. "You can trust me," he said softly. "I'll never ask for more than you're willing to give. I'll always respect your pace, your choices, and your heart." The words, combined with his steady presence, broke through the last of her fears. She allowed herself to lean slightly into him, feeling the warmth of his hand, the strength in his arms, and the sincerity in his eyes. For the first time in years, she felt safe, not just physically, but emotionally. She realized that she could allow herself to care, to love, and to be loved without fear of betrayal. Over the next few weeks, their connection deepened. They shared quiet moments working on the ranch, walking through the fields and talking about their lives. She told him stories of her childhood, her family, and the journey that had brought her here. He listened patiently, never judging, never interrupting, offering understanding and empathy instead. In turn, he shared stories of his own life, of the hardships, the joys, and the lessons learned from years of work on the land. She learned that courage, kindness, and integrity were not abstract concepts for him. They were woven into every action, every decision, every word. She admired his strength, not just in physical tasks, but in the consistency of his character. One day, while helping him repair a fence, she paused and looked at him seriously. "I've been hurt before," she said quietly. "People I trusted, they didn't care. They left me. I don't want to feel that again." The rancher looked at her with understanding, his expression soft and calm. "I know," he said, "and I'll do everything I can to prove that I'm different, not with words but with actions. I won't leave you. I won't let you down, and I'll respect your heart always." She felt the truth in his words. She had been given proof of his care time and time again, through the storm, the threats, the small gestures, and the quiet patience he had shown. She realized that love wasn't about grand declarations. It was about trust, respect, and consistent action. The bond between them grew stronger with each passing day. She began to rely on him more, not out of necessity, but because she wanted to. She found joy in his presence, comfort in his patience, and strength in his unwavering support. The rancher, in turn, continued to act with integrity, always putting her safety and comfort first, showing her that love could be steady, selfless, and genuine. One evening, as the sun set and the sky turned a deep shade of purple, they sat together under the stars. The air was cool, carrying the scent of the fields and the quiet hum of the town in the distance. She leaned slightly against him, feeling the warmth and safety he offered. For the first time, she allowed herself to feel completely at peace, completely accepted, and completely loved. "I never thought I'd feel like this," she whispered. "Safe, cared for, loved. I didn't think it was possible." The rancher held her hand gently, looking into her eyes. "It is possible," he said softly. "And it's real. You don't have to be afraid anymore. I'm here, and I'll always be here, no matter what." Tears came to her eyes, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming sense of relief and joy. She had spent years guarding herself, but now she felt a freedom she had never known. The freedom to love, to trust, and to be vulnerable with someone who truly cared. From that moment on, their lives became intertwined in ways that felt natural and effortless. They worked together on the ranch, shared meals, and spent evenings walking through the fields, talking and laughing. She began to see the town differently, not as a place of judgment or danger, but as a place where she could belong, supported by someone who had proven that care and love were real. The rancher and the woman grew closer each day, their relationship built on a foundation of trust, patience, and respect. She no longer repeated the words that had once been her shield, "Don't touch me unless you mean it." Instead, she embraced the truth behind them. He had meant it all along, and now she could trust that love and care could be genuine. One evening, as the stars twinkled above and the town lay quiet, she turned to him and said softly, "I believe you, I know you mean it, and I want to be with you." He smiled, a warmth spreading across his face, and gently pulled her into an embrace. "I've been waiting to hear that," he said, his voice filled with quiet joy. "And I'll cherish every moment with you always." In that embrace, under the vast, starry sky, they both understood the power of patience, trust, and genuine love. The trials, the storms, the moments of fear and uncertainty. All had led them here to a place where hearts could be open, love could be true, and a future together could begin. The Apache woman and the rancher had faced challenges, danger, and doubt. Yet through it all, they had discovered something rare and beautiful. A love built not on fleeting passion, but on consistent care, respect, and the willingness to act with integrity, even when it was difficult. They had proven that trust could be earned, that courage could be quiet yet powerful, and that true love was patient, understanding, and unwavering. As the night deepened and the stars shone brightly overhead, they sat together in silence, their hearts full of hope and gratitude. They had found each other against the odds, and now, with trust established and love blossoming, they knew that nothing could break the bond they had formed. In the quiet of the night, the Apache woman whispered once more, her words no longer a shield but a declaration. "You meant it, and I know now I can trust love." The rancher held her hand, smiling softly. "And I always will," he said. And so their story reached a beginning rather than an end. A story of courage, sacrifice, trust, and love that would continue to grow, nurtured by respect, patience, and unwavering care. The town, the fields, and the quiet nights had witnessed a rare kind of connection, one that proved true love could be gentle, steadfast, and real.